Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Take Shelter, starring Michael Shannon and Jessica Chastain, directed by Jeff Nichols. Now, I've seen a couple of these movies before. Like, I've seen Midnight Special, Mud, and there was another one. Oh, yeah, Loving. But I'm kind of curious about The Bike Riders, as I kind of want to review it because it looks like a good movie. So, I've never seen this movie before, to be fair, nor his first film. What was the name of it? I'm gonna forget now. But I couldn't add it to the series because it wasn't streaming anywhere. So let's see what this is all about. Let's get into this movie. We open in a house in Ohio where a bunch of storms happen, and a working man named Curtis, played by Michael Shannon, has a wife, Samantha, played by Jessica Chastain, and a deaf young daughter, Hannah, as they eat breakfast together. And Curtis goes to work, and I like these three characters as a family. It starts to rain in Ohio while Samantha and Hannah had some neighborly friends, and they go home when the rain comes in while Curtis has happy hour at the bar with his coworker Duart, and they get drunk as Curtis drives Duart home, and Curtis gets home when Hannah's asleep, and Samantha waits for him, and the cinematography is pretty good in this movie, but I wouldn't call it an Oscar winner by any means necessary. Next day comes as it rains, and Curtis sees some storms coming, and he thinks about building a shelter if something were to happen to them on a stormy day, while their dog comes up to Curtis and Hannah and bites Curtis in the hand, and he wakes up and as it was just a dream on a different well, yeah, it was just a dream, and he goes to work, which seems random to move on to from the dog biting Curtis, which he would never do if that's his owner, to Curtis going to work the next day. Meanwhile, he sees some birds gathering up like another storm is coming, and Curtis gets home and goes with Samantha to Hannah's school for the deaf and listen to the teacher while he smells bad. And the chemistry between Michael Shannon and Jessica Chastain was good to watch as they act well together. Curtis has a dream he gets in an accident on the highway as he's injured while some people kidnap Hannah as he looks sick, and he makes the dogs stay in this own little fence while he makes a shelter for him and his family in case a giant storm comes into to them, and he makes an emergency shelter from his basement. And Michael Shannon's performance is very good, but I'm asking halfway through the movie, is he a genius or insane? And the reason I say this is because he is paranoid about more storm coming towards them while while in that time of season, as Samantha brings up why is the dog outside, as he's always been an inside dog. And next day comes, and he believes he sees someone in front of the house, and they're living in, and as it was a dream, and the audience sees he wet the bed, and Samantha goes to church, and Curtis stays home with Hannah to give her some breakfast, and takes Hannah to the library as he looks for some books about mental illness. And this is the point I'm thinking Curtis is fucking insane at this point, while out with Hannah from the library to the grocery store. Curtis and Hannah get home from the library and as well as the grocery store, and Samantha was worried about where they were for a few hours, and they have lunch with some church friends, and we move on to nighttime where Samantha sees Curtis working on the basement, and Curtis goes to the doctor to tell him he needs to get some medication as he needs a therapist because of what he's been going through, and giving him a card of a psychiatrist in Columbus, which is a bit of a drive from the town where they're at. And he picks up his medication, excuse me, and the story is good and well written, but at the same time, this is fucking depressing with a mentally ill story that works for this genre of drama, which that's what this is, by the way, folks. Curtis hears thunderstorms while it's in his imagination, and he vomits and takes off for the day at work as his throat was driving him crazy. And he visits his mother to tell her what's been happening to him for the past few days. And I felt bad for Curtis, as this is good filmmaking by director Jeff Nichols. And the shots work pretty well. Curtis tells his doctor he can't see the psychiatrist in Columbus as he's too far away, and asks for someone local in his town. And Curtis asks Stuart for help with the shelter for his basement, and Dewar asks Curtis to not fuck up as he gets a counselor to talk about his problems, and she asks, and by she I'm talking about Samantha, asks about his mother being in a state hospital. At nighttime comes, and Curtis sees a lightning storm while driving Hannah home, and that is a very good shot of the storm scenes, as this movie has some very good shots in some scenes, including with the thunderstorms. That was one of them. Curtis and Dewar work on their yard to work on the shelter, and Samantha gets home with Hannah and is shocked to shit about what Curtis is doing to their backyard, and she's led to believe he's out of his fucking mind. And they talk about how he didn't involve her, and she doesn't understand any of the things he's been doing as of lately. And in my opinion, I believe she gets a say in this type of situation. Now, I'm not from the East, and I'm no expert on this type of stuff, how this type of stuff works. Curtis dreams while having a seizure, and Samantha calls an ambulance as he doesn't need it. And this is when my opinion on Curtis comes to sour a little bit, because he doesn't make mutual decisions with Samantha, but he confesses he's been having dreams of, and that's why he's acting like the way he is from the start to now and possibly finish, as he feels pain everywhere. But don't get me wrong, this is a good performance by Michael Shannon, but his character is kind of souring on me. Not saying that I don't like him, but maybe I'll get there, who knows. While there were times the movie was slowly paced, but hell, that might be director Jeff Nichols' style. To begin with, Curtis doesn't want to work with Dewar anymore, despite he's a good worker, and his boss tells him he's been missing quite a bit of work as of lately. And Samantha gets a talk with one of the neighborly friends about Nat about how strange Curtis has been acting as of lately, while Curtis buys some gas masks at the hardware store, and Curtis continues to work on the shelter, and his brother Kyle comes by because Samantha called him check up on him, and Curtis decides to give the dog to Kyle and his family, but Curtis is worried because Curtis is worried about getting bitten by the dog. And I like these scenes for the dialogue, as it's written well, and the movie is well acted and well made, don't get me wrong. Curtis dreams about being wet and attracting mold in the house, which is a disturbing scene, while Curtis won't let Samantha touch his hand. And Curtis's boss, Jim, comes to see the shelter because Dewar tells him he helped out working with him on his backyard. And he tells Curtis he broke a lot of rules and fires Curtis and Dewar, as Curtis tells Samantha, and she slaps him in the face and leaves Hannah how are they supposed to pay for the house? And he gets to a different counselor, and he leaves in the middle of the session because he doesn't like the way he brought up his mother in a negative way. And this is when the movie starts to get depressing, in my opinion. Good movie, but still depressing. While working on the shelter, and Curtis sets up a toilet, and Samantha comes home, and as Hannah chats with Curtis, and nighttime comes, and Curtis shows Samantha the shelter, he asks if he's going to leave him, if she's going to leave him, I mean, and asks if she could deal with it, and they still stick together and cancel their vacation plans, and they're both going to get new jobs, which is quite a compromise. And she forces him to go to a dinner with some people where he'll see Dewar, which will lead to an awkward scene. And I like the compromise scene more than the dinner scene, which makes Curtis burst into anger like he's fucking crazy about a damn storm, and he cries as once again this is an awkward scene. Curtis fixes his truck while Hannah goes to the street, and Curtis goes after her and sees the birds flying together once again and towards them as they die out of the blue. And I thought, what the hell is that? As it was a dream, and an emergency alarm comes in and wakes up Curtis, Samantha, and Hannah as they go to the shelter and wear their oxygen masks. And he came prepared, and they lie there as a family, and Curtis wakes up, as does the family. And Samantha and Hannah take off their masks, and Samantha tells Curtis, well, it's off screen anyways, and Samantha tells Curtis to take off his mask, and she tells him to open the door, and he asks what if it's not over yet, while it is all over. And they slowly open the door and see it's all over there, and there's civilization near where there's as it's a sunny day now and people clean up their yards as it became messy on the ground, and they survive the storm and hug it out. And Curtis and Samantha visit a psychiatrist, and he recommends they take a vacation, the psychiatrist, I mean, and they go to a beach for a vacation and make a sandcastle, excuse me. And after a hand, Curtis will need to be locked up for cure reasons, like a mental hospital, let's say it best, as they see Curtis was right all along because there's a storm coming, and this climax made me very sad, but at the same time, it is a good movie, but at the end of the day, it was fucking depressing, and I didn't expect that. He was a genius for making a shelter for that kind of an ending. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. I like the characters in this movie, as the chemistry between Michael Shannon and Jessica Chastain works pretty good, as the cinematography is not an Oscar winner, but it looks pretty good. But at the same time, this movie is absolutely depressing. It's well written for that, works for the genre drama, and there were times I was thinking Michael Shannon's character was insane as far as the building the shelter goes, but if for him and his family versus hearing things are concerned. But at the end of the day, he was a genius about it, and there were times I did feel bad for him, and that is good filmmaking from director Jeff Nichols, as the shots were working pretty well. And at the end of the day, this movie was depressing, sure, like I said, and they go through a dramatic experience along with Curtis selling his dog versus what he's going through, to hell, even his job when he gets fired and his friend no longer trusting him, as that was super depressing. And it is a recommendation for this movie. Is well directed and well acted, well made, and I liked it for what it was, which was a dramatic story. And there's some good shots in some scenes, like with a lightning strike. That's a very good shot. But at the end of but there were times I was kind of souring on Curtis, but at the end of the day, he was still a genius to build that in the first place. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Mud. And until next time, ladies and dude mans, take shelter.